Welcome to The Explainer. Let's just dive right in, shall we? Today, we're going to confront some seriously uncomfortable truths about why you might be feeling a bit stuck right now. We're drawing on some brilliant, really hard-hitting insights from author Mark Manson, and we're going to break down the actual anatomy of failure. We're going to pull apart those excuses we tell ourselves every single day.
To start, I want you to take a second and literally conjure up in your mind the biggest failure of your life. What is it? Picture that massive goal you haven't accomplished, that epic fail you are trying your absolute hardest to forget. Or maybe it's that string of coulda, shoulda moments you're living right now. Keep that picture locked in your head as we move forward, because we're going to figure out exactly why it happened.
So, here's our roadmap for today. We aren't just rattling off a random list. Instead, we'll start with the anatomy of failure, move into surface-level traps and social saboteurs, and finally dig way down into the deep psychological roots and the ultimate truth.
All right, Section 1, the anatomy of failure, how the disease spreads.
Here's the thing. A profound struggle in one area of your life is inevitably going to bleed over into the others. Failure, it turns out, isn't prejudiced. The exact same timidity that keeps you from asking someone on a date, it's the exact same flaw that stopped you from taking that dream job across the country, or standing up to your domineering coworkers, or dealing with your passive-aggressive family. The behavioral patterns sabotaging you in private are absolutely stalking you in public. You don't just have a dating problem or a money problem. You have a root behavioral problem that's spreading across your entire life like wildfire.
Moving on to Section 2, the surface-level traps, distractions, and excuses.
Let's be real. A lot of the time, you fail because you're just too distracted. If the majority of your waking life is spent constantly looping through useless social media fluff, from your Facebook newsfeed to random tweets over to Reddit, maybe some funny cat pictures on Imgur, and then back to your email inbox, you're suffering from what Manson calls attention saturation disorder. You're clicking instead of living. You're opting for that easy dopamine hit over deep, meaningful work. Practicing self-discipline has to start with cutting out this sensationalized infotainment so you can reclaim your time and actually focus on what matters.
And hey, when you aren't distracted, you're probably making excuses. You fail because you won't take responsibility. Some people will craft these wild, chaotic, entirely external excuses. They'll blame this intricate chain of events involving a taxi driver named Abu, a crying kid named Timmy, and Puritan cops who just don't get it, rather than simply admitting they messed up. The reality is, if you don't take responsibility for the problems in your life, you hand over all your agency. You have literally zero power to fix a problem if you believe it's entirely someone else's fault. It really is that simple.
Which brings us to the severe lack of persistence so many of us suffer from. Take debut author Karl Marlantes as a perfect example of what it really takes. He spent over half his life, 35 agonizing years, fighting to publish his acclaimed Vietnam novel, Matterhorn. For the first 2 decades, publishers barely even gave it a glance. He faced endless rejection, but instead of quitting, he just kept working. 6 major rewrites later, it was finally published and hailed as one of the greatest books ever written about the war. This completely crushes that excuse that you tried for a month and it didn't work. Real persistence is a decades-long grind, and most of us just give up on our passions way, way too soon.
Okay, Section 3, the social saboteurs. Other people in your ego. Ralph Waldo Emerson once totally nailed this when he said, "Society everywhere is in conspiracy against the self-reliance of every one of its members." You fail because you're afraid to stand out among the crowd. When you push for greatness, it shines this really uncomfortable light on the squashed dreams of the people around you. Manson actually tells a story of a fellow entrepreneur who returns home after traveling the world building these wildly successful online businesses, only to have his father promptly tell him to go get a normal job. You cannot let the complacency of others dictate your path. If you want to do something incredible, you have to become totally comfortable with being seen as different, crazy, or even arrogant by the herd.
Think about the universal feedback loop of success. It's pretty straightforward. You try something, you get feedback and results, you learn from that feedback, and then you try something new. But you fail because you'd rather argue against advice instead of actually taking it. When you argue against feedback just to prove you're right, using your intellect as a defense mechanism for your fragile ego, you mechanically break this exact feedback loop. You literally guarantee that you will never change and never grow. You're choosing the fleeting comfort of trying to be right over the difficult, messy path of actually becoming good.
And honestly, notice the severe lack of humility in how we operate. There's a fascinating contrast between 2 distinct archetypes out there in the professional world. First, you have your moderately successful loudmouths. These are the folks who constantly exaggerate, sap all the attention from the room, and act like they always have the answer.
On the flip side, you have legitimate self-made millionaires. They downplay their success. They ask really insightful questions. They openly admit their weaknesses and acknowledge exactly what they don't know. True experts possess genuine humility. If you've accomplished a little bit and immediately decided you're a flawless expert, well, you're setting yourself up to fail. You also fail because you forget to network and build strong relationships. You try to play the lone wolf in a world where roughly half of all jobs come from knowing someone. But it's not even just about professional success. It's about your actual health. Research shows that living without regular social contact, like true isolation, is physically as unhealthy as smoking cigarettes. Isolation doesn't just leave you broke, it leaves you deeply lonely and depressed. You've got to step out of your obsessive need for control and learn to connect with others.
All right, digging much deeper now. Section 4. The deep psychological roots: fear, belief, and Yoda.
You fail because you literally don't believe success is possible for you. It's wild, but studies actually show that athletes with inaccurate positive beliefs, meaning they slightly overestimate their own abilities, actually outperform athletes who accurately and negatively assess their limits. Why? Because a slight delusion of grandeur makes you get off your couch and actually try. Believing it's possible is the absolute, non-negotiable prerequisite to putting in the effort.
Now look, this isn't some mystical manifestation magic. Your unconscious beliefs directly dictate your actual physical effort and your expectation of success. So unless you plan on outsourcing your life to Yoda for $3 an hour on the Dagobah system to magically move things with the Force for you, you need to understand that your internal belief system is what's driving your external reality.
Building on that, you fail because you're simply afraid to care. A lot of us catch the indifference bug. We lack a true passion or the wherewithal to invest ourselves top to bottom into a pursuit. But chronic indifference is an insidious defense mechanism. By acting like you don't care and never fully committing, you protect yourself from the potential pain of failure. Because think about it, if you try your absolute hardest and still fail, you have to confront terrifying questions about your own self-worth and competence. So it's just way easier to pretend you don't care, right?
We've hit the deep end. Section 5. The ultimate truth: hitting rock bottom.
You fail because deep down, beneath all the excuses, all the distractions, and the feigned indifference, you simply don't believe you deserve what you want. Take the story of entrepreneur Sebastian Marshall. He drew up a perfect, workable, completely customized plan for a client to make $400 an hour and achieve total financial freedom. It was foolproof. The client's response? He cringed and said no. When Marshall asked him why on earth he was rejecting a clear path to his own success, the client admitted he didn't feel ready, didn't want to confront his potential, and ultimately confessed, "I don't think I deserve that much."
It's a massive self-esteem conundrum. You will almost always find a way to get rid of what you feel isn't rightfully yours, whether it's a dream job you can't bring yourself to take, an incredible creative opportunity you ignore, or even the best person you've ever loved. If you don't feel worthy, this sludge pool of doubt is going to bubble up. It'll summon this worm-tongued voice in the back of your mind that prods your insecurities until you find a way to destroy everything you've worked for.
So the absolute hardest truth of this entire explainer comes down to one simple thing. It's you. There is literally no other variable in this equation. As much as you might try to deny it, to blame the chaotic taxi driver, to blame society, or to distract yourself with a million open browser tabs, that fear will always linger as an invisible barrier. The barrier keeping you from happiness, from progress, and from success is entirely constructed by your own mind. Which leaves us with the ultimate question for today. Are you ready to shatter that invisible barrier, or are you going to keep finding ways to ruin it for yourself? The fear's real, absolutely, and the issues we've discussed today can be overcome, but it requires gut-wrenching, painful work. I challenge you today to confront that simmering fear, acknowledge your own true worth, and finally get out of your own way. Because overcoming yourself, that's the only true way forward. The choice is yours.